Hello there, everyone. It's 9 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. I got a lot that I want to try to get through. I am Todd Weller with Cross IT Services and Solutions. This session is Get What's New. Here's some information about me when I'm at work, when I'm not at work. That's all the time I have to talk about that. I will add, though, however, that if, despite any similarities in appearance, I've never played a doctor on television. If you say, "Talk to me, Goose," I will stop and talk to you. I just wanted to set a few expectations for this session. This session is about, an introduction to let you know what is possible as we talk about these are the new features, these are the new updates, things that have changed. And it is specifically focused on FileMaker 2023, so it's what's new, it's not what's next. So I hope you're not just, we can't show you it's coming. It's stuff that we already have. But then also, this session is not going to be a detailed explanation of everything. Okay? My goal for this session was to let you know what is new so that when you go back and you encounter a problem either for yourself or for a client, you can say, "I think we can do this," and then you can go get that extra information that you need to fully implement the script step or the function or the feature on server or whatever it happens to be. The other thing that I struggled with was how to classify all of these features that we're going to be talking about, because there's a lot of them. It's like, obviously we could group it by release, but then do we just say, well, these are the ones that are for pro, these are the ones that are for server, these are the ones that are both pro and server, or do we do like a top 10 or a top 20 features? But then, of course, my ranking of features may be different than your ranking of features because of how you try to tackle things. So that's why I'm trying to cover everything. So what I decided to do, just to have a little bit of fun, is I'm going to tell you what sandwich I think of when I see this feature. What I mean by that is you've got your ham sandwich. Those are those under the hood features or updates. They need to be into the platform. Obviously, Claris Engineering wouldn't have worked on them unless they were there or unless they were needed. So you've got, even with Grandma's homemade bread, though, it's still a ham sandwich. With apologies to the server team, most of these are server features. But honestly, if your server gets too exciting, that's really not a place you want to be there. Then from there, we move on to the meatball sub. Those are the features that have a little bit more, typically a little bit more user-facing, because whenever you implement that particular feature, your users get excited about what they're now able to do. It's more exciting to implement as a developer. It's got the marinara, it's got the melted mozzarella, maybe some banana peppers on the top. And then finally, because I'm from Western Pennsylvania, the top features are those Primanti sandwich of features, which would be where you've got your meat, your cheese, French fries, and coleslaw all in a sandwich. Those are the ones that are usually aimed at developers, because that's what gets me excited, is the new features that make my life easier. And so they're the features that we've been waiting for. It's like, where have you been all my life? You use it for the first time. And just in case you're wondering, that's a capicola and cheese. Wow.
Lunch break items?
Yeah, so that's why I was glad I was right after breakfast and not just before lunch. All right, so starting with FileMaker 20.3, I got one ham sandwich. OmniOrb has been updated. Until I started researching this session, I didn't even know OmniOrb was a thing. Rest assured, it has been updated. So we got the meatball sub. There's two features here that kind of go together. On server, you can now have secure connection tunneling over port 443 instead of 5003, which can be very important if you're in an area where opening port 5003 in your network is difficult. You now have the option to use 443. But this is a feature that's limited to FileMaker server running on Linux. So just be aware of that. It's not you can just turn it on for Windows or Mac. It's Linux specific. And we also have an updated function, which is the Get Network Protocol on Pro, which will tell you and returns HTTPS when that tunneling over 443 is enabled. What I found interesting is this feature actually predates FileMaker 6. And it has returned different values over the years, but for the longest time, it has returned one value, PIP. Now it returns a second value, so they've updated that with that feature update. And then there's a few other ones here. You have relationship caching, optimized memory allocation for relationship changes, on Pro and Server for both of those. And then the check for enabled accounts during logins is now cached. So all of these three things together with the caching that they're trying to do is just about improving performance. So it's not having to constantly go and check those things as you're using it. So that's why they got bumped up to the default sub, because anything that improves performance, I think we can all agree is pretty good. So for Permane sandwiches, we've now able to specify the data type for layout calculations. Fortunately, I can't talk about that until you're older. And then the loop script step now includes a flush option. What that is that determines when relationships are updated as you're doing set field with inside the looping operation. We'll have a little bit of demo to kind of give you a taste for what that looks like.
Nice.
And there's also now the FM developer tool, command line tool. Let's run 11 different functions or operations from a command line that normally you would have to do from a menu in FileMaker Pro. Where that comes in handy if you need to do something on a Linux server to check a file or do something, you can now have a tool to do that if you're running on Linux without having to move the file off to somewhere and move it back. All right, so for our first demo, look at the details first. Okay, so there's three options for the flush setting. The first one, probably no surprise, always. Which as it goes through as it sets the field, it's going to, the relationship is flushed along with any of the join data associated with the field that you've set. There is a minimum setting, which means it's going to do the minimal amount as far as flushing the join data and the cache and all of that. And then the second or the final option is to defer. And what that is that the relationship and join data are flushed only after exiting the loop. So it goes through the entire loop without touching anything in the relationship. A couple of interesting things of note on this. First, the always option is the behavior we've had with the loop script step in any previous version. So that's what it's always done. So that's what it's going to default to as well. And then if you want more information, you can check out, there's a Claire's Engineering blog article that I relied on heavily as I was putting this demo together. So you can get into that and read even more details and actually test it out for yourself. So now for the demo, I love roller coasters, so I figured I'm going to talk about that. So this is just a database that I've set up where we've got three tables with parks that I like to visit, the roller coasters that I like to ride, and then of course, as a data guy, I record every ride experience that I have. And so under the fields, straightforward, we got primary key, and then some information about the park. As we get over to the coasters, again, primary key, foreign key relating that coaster back to the park where it's located, and some information about the coaster. And then finally, when we get into the rides, we've got the primary key, and then we've got the foreign key of the coaster that was written. But then I'm also going to copy some information over about both the park and the coaster to see and kind of capture a snapshot of that. And then the relationship itself is pretty straightforward, where we just have our ride TO related to the coaster via the foreign key there. And then from the coaster, we're then related to the park. So we've got three tables, two relationships, and we'll check out and see what difference is that. And so with the layout, what you'll see here is that the layout is actually based on that ride TO. So all of the fields are pulling from that ride table, whether it's for the park or the coaster. The only field that is not is the one that is the foreign key of the park, which resides in that coaster table. So it's the one hop away as you think about the relationship graph. So that's our layout. And so the script looks like this. And again, I think we're all familiar with the looping script. So I just set a list of return separated values for the coaster IDs of the ones that I like to ride the most. Get an account of those, and then we just set up a loop, create some new records, insert the ID for that iteration of the loop, give it a rating, for all 10s, by the way, and then go ahead and capture that information from our coaster table and our part table into the corresponding fields in the ride table. And then our flush is set to always. Save that, exit that, and now we can go ahead and run that script, and it creates, the 9 records that we would have expected it to create. That makes sense. So let's go ahead and make a change now. And I'm going to skip minimum for right now. We're going to switch to defer. Go ahead and run that again. And we've got the coaster ID was filled in. We got the creation date. We got the rating, but nothing else was filled in because the relationships were not, as the relationships were established, they weren't evaluated because it was deferred until we got out of the loop. So as we get back in, we'll go ahead and check out the minimum version now. Change, we'll go ahead and save it. Go ahead and run the script now. And so same things were filled in as the defer option, but you'll notice over on the left, we're now able to see that the relationship was established to that coaster table that sits in the middle, and that value filled in, but we did not get any park information because it was 2 hops away as we think about our relationship graph. Now, the one thing that surprised me when I went through this is that I would have expected to see the coaster information filled in because it is that 1 hop away, but for whatever reason, that did not fill in. So obviously, as you're using this for yourself and you want to improve your script performance, just make sure you do the appropriate amount of testing to make sure that your data is still valid and you're getting the results that you need and expect. So that's the flush. All right, so the FM Developer tool, it provides command line access to 11 menu item actions in FileMaker Pro. There are 4 that you find under the file Save a Copy As, which are copy, cloned copy, compacted copy, and self-contained copy. For the tools, save a copy as XML. You can save a copy as XML. For the developer utilities, under that menu, you have enable encryption, disable encryption, move the admin access to a file, and also enable kiosk mode. And then the last one is under the file recovery menu for checking consistency and running a recover operation. It's available 2 different ways. Whenever you install FileMaker Server 20.3.1, it's automatically going to be on whatever machine you've installed FileMaker Server on. You also have the option to download it from the Claris Downloads page. This is the first link that I found, which is actually on the community site, but there may be another spot for the download from Claris Download as well. There are 2 additional commands or actions that you can run, which probably comes as no surprise. The first one is you can get the version number. Obviously, there's only 1 version right now, but as the tool iterates, it may become important to know which version you're running at the time, so you're able to check that. And then, of course, the help to give you all of the details of what your different options are. And it's very similar to the FMS admin command line tool, which probably comes as no surprise, where you have the command, you specify the action, and then whatever action-specific options are needed to make sure that the command executes the way that you need it to. So here's an example of what the developer tool for checking consistency would look like, where we specify our source file name and then any encryption key that may or may not be on the file.
You would run that while the file's open?
Good. And so here's an example of what we're looking at there. So obviously we're running on Windows in the command line prompt, developer tool version. See that, and it only returns the number. Run that again to get the help. You actually get all of the help. Where FMS admin, you can kind of specify, I want help for this. This one gives you everything every time. And you can see there's our copy, save as XML, file utilities, and then also consistency and recovery, with all of the different options that you have for each of those actions. And then as you scroll down to the bottom of the help, they give you some details about how to specify those various options, where you have, I don't know if it's official, but I call it like the long name of what the option is, or the single letter shortcut if you so I've created a meeting file that you can see there on the desktop. Just did a new file, picked a starter solution, so it has no records, it hasn't been used, it just exists there for the sake of this little demo. And so we're going to go ahead and run a recovery option on it. And what that would look like is you do the FM developer tool that you want to recover. So you don't have to watch me type, we're just going to paste it. That is the file that we're recovering. Specify the target file name for the recovered file. I'm going to spell it out, but obviously you could use like -T here instead if you don't. Paste in the name again. Save some keystrokes. So there's the recovered file. And then we just specify how we are going to do the recovery. In this case, we're going to go ahead and rebuild everything in the file. And then you can also specify how to handle the indexes, and we're going to say go ahead and rebuild those now. Run the command. Seconds, you'll see the file appears there on the desktop along with the recover log file. If we go ahead and open up that recover log file, you'll see that it looks exactly the same as if we had run it from FileMaker Pro. Scroll down here to the bottom to make sure that everything worked as expected. We can see that yes, it was successful. So that is the FMS developer or FM developer command line tool. It's a bit of a mouthful. All right, so that takes care of 20.3. So now we can move into 20.2. No ham sandwiches in this version. For the meatball sub, we have an API. FileMaker Server Admin Console now use servers local time instead of UTC. So if you're going a lot with either of those on servers that are not in your time zone or multiple things, just be aware that that has changed. So if you think the time is off, just make sure you check the time zone where you're at. Server. And there's a couple Kubernetes features. Trigger Claris Connect Flow script step now includes a dialog to select flow from Claris Connect, so you're no longer having to copy that webhook URL from Claris Connect back into your script step. We'll look at a demo of that. And add layout calculations to layouts is now a new thing. I told you you couldn't learn about this until you're older. Congratulations, you're older. So we're going to go ahead and look at a demo of what that looks like. All right, so the trigger Claris Connect flow. There's 5 options for this script step. We have obviously the flow that you're going to select now, the JSON data payload that you're going to be sending to the webhook to continue the action inside the flow. You're still able to specify the URL, which it's not necessary now, but you still have that option. Then of course, the app ID and API key for webhooks can be specified if you have to worry about that. And then the last thing is a target for the result of the script step after it executes. Interesting things of note here is that the flow value that you select from the dialog when you first set up the script step, that is what it is at that moment of time. It's essentially for reference. So if your script step or your flow name changes in Claris Connect, FileMaker Pro is not going to recognize that. So I did not have a chance to go back and I didn't want to break anything, so I didn't change a name just to see what it does. I think because it still has the URL, you're probably okay, but I would certainly be wary of changing the name of something triggering. And the other thing was that if you do not specify a target value for this script step, is that if a field is active, that is the target that it will use. So that may or may not be the behavior that you're going to want, so just be aware of that. All right, so let's look at some demo. And of course, to trigger a flow, we have to have a flow to trigger. So I've set up a very simple one. As you can tell, we're just going to use the trigger by script step for the flow here. single action, configure it, which it gives us, some information about how to, that callback URL that you see down here in step number 4, where it says you want to set the URL to the link that has been generated there below. Still do that, but because we can select the flow by name, it's no longer necessary. So, and then our second step here is I just picked the step for working with Outlook, and we're just going to create an event on my calendar from data that's in FileMaker. Event. The account name is just my email account information for Office 365. And then under configure, we're just grabbing the step data that came over in that JSON data payload from step number 1. And I got this information on how to set it up just using the documentation for the Office 365 and Outlook. Grab a piece of information out of the JSON. And here's a picture of my calendar to prove that there is no event there now. And hopefully there will be before this video is over. All right, so the calendar event, well, the first thing you need to do is you have to make sure that you sign into your Claris ID and into that Claris Connect team of the flow that you want to trigger, so that you don't have to watch me type my password. Pass. And now we're signed in, and we know this because it says now sign out. So that's the sign that you're signed in, as it says sign out. And so we just have an event here that I could have hard coded it into the script, but I thought it was better to show it as just a event here, FileMaker record. And then we have the script that we're going to run. And the first step is just making sure that our JSON data is properly formed so that that Outlook step is going to know what to do with it. And just assembling that JSON object. There at the top, all I have doing is using a custom function to take the date and time for the event and putting it together in the format that Outlook wants to see. Nothing's fancy there. And then assembling the smaller JSON objects for location, start time, end time in the format that it expects, and then put everything together with like the subject line, which is a string, the body, and those other nested JSON objects. And then the last thing that we do there is just do a set elements so that it's a little bit easier for troubleshooting and it makes it. So that is the calculation for the JSON payload. And before we get to the script step, I'm going to go ahead and save that, go ahead and run the script, get debugger, and stop it so we can look at our JSON payload to make sure that that looks like it's correct via data viewer. We'll get in here with our JSON data. And it looks like that is, comparing it to the API documentation, it looks like that's what it needs to see. So it looks like I'm in a good shape there, so we can go ahead and get to that. Close the viewer and let the script finish executing. No result because we haven't actually run the script yet. That script step, I should say. And so now we're ready to go ahead and finish editing the script and put that step in there. So we'll drop that in there. And it's, trigger Claris Connect flow with the type ahead. And then there it automatically brings up the dialog to select our flow. There it's selected team, as well as the flow. If you're in multiple teams with that same Claris ID, you'll be able to select each team for the flow you want to use. And the same thing if there's multiple flows, you'll be able to select obviously which flow you want. Here in the settings, like I said, with the URL, you can still specify it and copy it over, but you'll notice because we selected the flow by name, that URL is filled in. There. And the other options under the little gear icon is, again, the API key, app ID, have to worry about in this case. And then under target, because assigning the target to a variable is an option, I like being explicit. So I don't leave anything to chance if I can help it. So I'm just going to set that to a result variable. And then the last step there is we just do reference our JSON data. Click in there and put in the variable name. Now, obviously, this is also a calculation dialog, so you could have done all the calculation here if you wanted. Just because of how I program and for ease of troubleshooting, I always do it in set variable. there is our completed script step for triggering flow. Save that change. Go ahead and get out and run that script step or run the script. Comes back and says that the result is okay. Switch over to my Outlook calendar. There is the event. Go into details to verify that like yes, I am riding roller coaster. And see. What's nice is you'll notice that it's actually 3 hours. If you actually use Outlook, it jumps from 2 to 4. You can actually use this to set a custom reminder time. Not limited to choices you get from it. All right, so for layout calculations, to insert a layout calculation is very easy. You just choose the Insert Layout Calculations option from the Insert menu. It's there at the bottom. If you're using Mac OS, there is a shortcut key combination for us to learn among the other 100 shortcut key combinations that we already have to know. And then you just enter, it opens a specify calculation dialog, and you just enter your calculation. Again, starting with version 20.3, you can now specify the calculation type. When in this version it was text, you can now specify text, number, date, time, timestamp, container, which is really not surprising because you will merge field or merge variable on your layout display goes. To modify the layout calculation, then you just do a right click on the calculation and then select Edit Layout Calculation from the contextual dialog pops up. So I have a demo of that. This is a different file that I use to track my roller coaster riding. So these are all the roller coasters that I rode last year, as well as the number of times I rode each one. And I wanted to call out which ones were new coasters that I had never ridden before, or at least new during the reporting period. And if you can kind of tell, I'm just using some conditional formatting there to highlight that on my layout. And I thought, well, this function is new. I'm going to go ahead and test it a little bit, so it was time to modify. So I'm going to get that merge field off of layout. Or actually, let's take a look at what the conditional formatting is here first. So it's very straightforward. Via some relationships and things that are under the hood, calculating, is this a credit during the reporting range that I've selected? And then I apply a text color if it is. Go ahead and get that off the layout so we can go ahead and add our new layout calculator. We do that. Again, insert, see it down there at the bottom, layout calculation. And it immediately opens up your specify calculation dialog that we all know and love. I'm going to paste the calculation in. So for time, and it's fairly straightforward. We're just getting an ASCII character of a star, find some color, and then we're grabbing the two fields that I was already using for is it a credit during the report range, as well as the actual count of rides, and then just concatenating that string together if it is a credit. So again, a super complicated calculation. First appears on the layout, you'll see here that it uses whatever your default text is for the calculation. So we want to go ahead and resize that, of course. Get down here, drag it into position. You'll notice that it uses the double less thans that we see for merge fields and merge variables, but it also puts the F colon indicator there at the beginning, so you know that that is a layout calculation. We'll fix the anchoring, fix the of it. We can save that, and now instead of seeing text, I see a nice little star. Which, I mean, yeah, I could have done it with a calculated field, but it's like it's new. Let's try it this way. So now I can see it. It's obviously a lot easier to see as it jumps out at you. If you want to edit now, you click into it. You can actually edit here if you want to. Not very intuitive, and obviously I doubt any of the type ahead is going to work or anything like that. So that's where you go in, get to your edit layout calculation, like that. You're back in specify. So that is layout calculation. Okay, so now we're to version 20.1. I know in the write-up I said, am I going to get through 30 features in the time that we have? There's a lot of ham sandwiches in this, so we're just going to hit them and keep moving. So hopefully you took the over sportsbook for how many features we get over. Okay, so there's two here that are just updates to things that are running on FileMaker server. And then there are three updates related to Java with FileMaker, or the new version of FileMaker, where they're using version 17 of Java. Also, the Java 17 JDK is now installed instead of the JRE to support Java garbage collection. This is specific to running on Linux, that particular update. And then you also receive a message if the Java version is not anything other than Java 17, like if you've done an in-place install of an older version of FileMaker. You'll get this warning, say, hey, the version of Java here which is nice that they're pointing that out. The XDBC connections now use SHA 256. And also the ODBC drivers now support OpenSSL 3.08. The Docker install script file now supports Ubuntu 22.04. That's specific to a FileMaker server update. Also on FileMaker server, it can be installed on the ARM64 architecture of Ubuntu 22.04. And on FileMaker Pro, you can double-click the FM cert license certificate file to initiate the license certificate import process. So if that's something that's a problem now, you can just, once you find the license certificate, you double-click on it, it'll prompt you through. And then there's two two functions related to the cache file that FileMaker uses. We're now able to get the cache file path as well as the cache file name through these functions. That's on FileMaker Pro. And then there's also a new function as well as two updated functions on FileMaker Pro related to the base tables that are there in the background. You can get the base table names, the first function, and then the base table names and base table ID functions return information about the base tables instead of all of the table occurrences. So if you're using those functions, you want to make sure that you are still getting the result that you want, since you're not getting as much base tables. Three more ham sandwiches. That is the dark mode is now partially supported when viewing the relationship graph. Obviously, that's in FileMaker Pro. On FileMaker Server, the maximum number of hosted database files has been increased from 125 to 256. So if you were at the limit of how many files are hosted because you have a lot of small files, you now have more room on your server to host up to 256, as long as you have the right hardware. And then the last one, this is for both FileMaker Server and FileMaker Pro, is that if you do anything with the read QR code function, it's now available to those and to Ubuntu. On to the meatball sub. Okay, so these are related to OData. You do a lot with OData. Schema version is now included in the OData metadata response. And then also OData now supports the put, post, patch, delete, ref operations. That is on FileMaker Server. On FileMaker Pro and FileMaker Server, the execute FileMaker data API script step now supports the date formats parameter. So if that's something that was missing in what you were trying to do via the data API, that's now an option. In the FileMaker Server admin console now provides a notification when consistency checks fail on a database backup, which I think is really cool, because sometimes an error in consistency of your backup is a flag to say, oh, I better check what my live file is doing so I can get in there and investigate before I do have a problem. So now we get that alert. Also, when a backup is aborted, whether it's aborted due to an error or because the user canceled it, that backup folder is now preserved with a prefix called canceled, and then that highlights it so you can get in there and check it out and see exactly what is going on. The get modified fields function on FileMaker Pro now returns fields containing data when a new record is created. Curl option, insert from URL script step, now supports SFTP and includes that pub key option for SFTP public key authentication. So if you're doing a lot with secure files, that's something that's going to be helpful. And then let's see what more meatball subs. SQL queries to FileMaker databases can now access a FileMaker base tables system table if you want to get information about the system. Able to use some SQL calls for that. It's on FileMaker Pro. On FileMaker Server, the Save as PDF script step is now supported for the FileMaker Data API. On FileMaker Server, scripts that are run, you now support set error logging script step. On FileMaker Server for Windows specifically, thumbnails can be immediately created for the PDF files that are in container fields. The two here that are related to the get live text. Get live text function, it now supports additional locales for Japanese, Korean, and Ukrainian. This is specific to Mac OS Ventura because they've added that with the OS. And then the get live text function is supported now on FileMaker Server, but again, that's limited to FileMaker Server running on Mac OS. So just be aware of that. And then the last one, which may be a big one for many of you, is that you can send mail using OAuth 2.0 authentication. So if you have systems where that is important, you now have the option to send it. All right, so now on to the Permane sandwich ones. The FileMaker Server configuration is now saved when uninstalling. To uninstall for any reason, there's going to be a configuration file for when you install to pick up on a lot of your settings and things. Fortunately, I do not have a demo that might shut a server down. The new client connections are now blocked for databases in the process of being closed. And we all hope that we never have to reboot a FileMaker server in the middle of the day. But one of the things that's frustrating when I had to do it, you would tell people, get out of the file, don't get back in until I tell you, and you're waiting for the files to close and people keep logging in. It's like, will you stop? Well, now they can't. So, like I said, it doesn't seem like it's exciting, but for me, it's a Permane sub feature. So, okay. Permane sandwich. All right, so the new trigger Claris Connect flow script step can initiate a Claris Connect flow automation. We already looked at this, so it was introduced here, further refined in 20.2. So we won't do a demo on that, but we will take a look at these next. So the script event log is now created to store script events. Before, if you wanted to find out what happened with your script that was running on FileMaker Server, you had to go to the events log and filter through all of these. Well, now there is a separate log file that will tell you specific script events. They've separated that, which is nice. The other thing is, if you're doing a lot with FileMaker publishing, is that you can now run the Java garbage collection to free up memory that is running on the FileMaker from the server admin console on the primary machine. There may have been a way to do this before they added this feature. The only way that I knew how to do it was to reboot the server. So the smarter people may have figured out other ways, but now it's just a click of a button from admin. There's a new perform script on server with callback script step, which does exactly what it says that it's going to do. So we'll take a look at an example of that. And then also there's a new on window transaction script step, which triggers JSON or creates a JSON object and triggers a script whenever a Windows transaction successfully. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. Okay, so the script event log is pretty straightforward. Here we are in our admin console. We get over to the logs tab, get down to where we select what log we're going to be looking at. You'll see there that there is the event log, and now we have the script event log if there are any script events that it needs to report. Pull that up. As you scroll through, you'll see that, yes, these all look like they are specific to script events. We're not filtering through any clutter that we don't want to look at. And just like anything else in the log viewer here within the admin console, you're able to go in, filter the error to a specific error number if something's giving you a problem. You can also filter by message. And if you like examining this in like any kind of third-party tool, you can then obviously select, download and get it, take it, and do whatever you do with it. So that's that. Garbage collection is as straightforward as well. Go to the connectors tab. Under the web publishing tab, you'll see we've got, of course, garbage collection option there at the bottom tab. And then all you need to do to run the garbage collection is just click that button. Sure. Do. Yes. All there is to it if you need to figure out your web.
Any gotchas? You run that? Got a busy day going on? Did it?
Not that I'm aware, but I didn't specifically test for that. So I would say definitely proceed with caution. But I would think it's not there if it's not safe to do during the day, but it may be something where you want to do after most of the users are out. There's not as much load on the machine.
This might be out of scope, but for those who don't know what that is, could you just a minute explain why you want to do garbage collection?
We have run into, and this has been earlier versions of FileMaker Server. We have a few clients that were heavily using FileMaker WebDirect for some anonymous users. And you have like a memory leak or something, the memory that is allocated to WebDirect just continues to build and build and build, and it doesn't get released the rest of the server processes. So this allows you to say, clear up that memory because either the users aren't in it or they've moved on to other tasks and we still have all of this other data cache. So it kind of clears it out. So it doesn't completely refresh the machine because it's not a reboot, but at least that memory is not being used by or being held by something that's not using it.
Could you not run that with a scheduled script at a certain time? There's no less level.
I don't know if you can or not. I'm not as familiar with some of the server-side script stuff, so I don't want to speak to that. There may be a way, but you'll have to talk to the other Todd. So, okay. So perform script on server with callback. There are two options. It come as no surprise that we need a script that we're going to run on the server, and then we need a callback script that we're going to run whenever the process is completed on server and control back to the client. A few interesting things of note if you're using this particular feature. The callback script is scheduled to run on the client when any current scripts are completed. Like if the user is not doing anything else, that script completes on server, the callback script is run immediately. But if there's some kind of scheduled script that was kicked off or the user is doing something else, the callback script is just going to queue up in the list of scripts to run, and then its first opportunity, it's going to go ahead and run that script. If you do not specify, I didn't put this in the slide, but if you do not specify a callback script, it doesn't generate an error. It just works the same way as perform script on server works if you say don't wait for the result. So there's no danger there of erroring. It just won't run the callback script.
Okay. But a quick question on that. When I looked at it, I think if I remember correctly, you write a script parameter. That parameter is going to be calculated on the local FileMaker, not on the server.
Correct.
It would be great if you collect some information coming through and supply that from the server, so you would see it, the dialogue giving lots of email.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another gotcha we'll look at here in just a second, but you are correct that you have to be careful about the script parameters that you can assign to both of them. The callback script will not run under certain conditions. If your server crashes, if the user crashes, obviously it's not going to call the callback script. If the user closes the file, obviously it's not going to be able to run the callback script. And if there's a network disruption for more than that 10 minutes of time that it tries to reconnect, it's probably not going to run the callback script. Well, so just aware of those scenarios. You are able to pass, as was mentioned, script parameters to both the script and the callback script. But what you need to know is that the script parameter, unless it's static text, is going to be evaluated at the time the callback script is run. It's not going to capture information when the whole process was started. So,
can you use script result?
we're set that at the end, I don't know.
Yeah.
Would
Let me
that
get-
help as a way to set parameters?
Yeah. Let me go through the demo and we'll see if that takes care of your question.
Okay,
That's
thank
okay.
you.
May I, could you go back to the slide, please?
With this one?
Yeah, the last one with your specifications. What do you mean here when you say after any current script has been completed?
Well,
Is that if there is concurrent?
well, that is like depending on how long the process that's taking on server, the user may be like, I'm going to go switch to a different layout, or I'm going to start running a script that's going to, print a document or run a report or something.
Okay,
The
understood.
callback is not going to interrupt the scripts that are running. It's just going to put itself in the queue to say, at the first opportunity when the machine is not busy, now I'm going to kick off this callback script.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yep. All right, so for the demo, again, we're back to my roller coasters. I like roller coasters. And so all we're going to do is we're going to go out and get information with a custom or just a very simple calculation here to get information on both client and on server so that you can see what the differences are. And I'm using this calculation here, just putting a bunch of stuff into a JSON object. I'm using get functions to get the username, the version of the host, as well as information about the client. As you can see there, in a fairly straightforward, we've all used get functions, thousands. So it's just going to return that chunk of JSON back when it runs. So in the script, few scripts set up. And so there you can see there for the script that's going to be performing on server, all I'm doing is I'm delaying it 5 seconds. And then I'm going to have it run that calculation and return that as a result. And then for the callback script, grabbing the system info, and what it is we're either getting the script result from once the script on the server is completed, we'll either get that result, or if that result is empty, I'm going to run that same calculation to get information about the local client machine, turn that. And then we get down to the bottom there, and I'm just going to show that in a custom dialog. So those are the two scripts that we're going to be toggling back and forth, and to execute those two scripts, what we have up here is we've got the script just as itself on the client, and I'm running that callback script so you can see what that looks like, and we're using get layout name as our parameter. And then we're going to do the same thing here for perform script on server with callback, and add that in, insert it. Script on server with callback, list, click on the gear to go ahead and define our options, which again are the script. Go for script on server. There's the optional parameter if we wanted to define it. Then callback script, get layout name parameter. Actually type window name, and I realized too late that I typed in the wrong function, but and so that is that script. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and close that, run our script locally for the callback script. And you can see there it's telling me, my IP address from my home office, I'm on Pro 23. And then it's giving me the information about the host where this file is hosted on server 2023, and there's its internal IP address. Layout name is the name of the layout that we're on, so that all good. So now let's go ahead and run callback script version of that. And I'm going to switch layouts while the process is running on server. And you can see here when it comes back, Now, the results are a little bit different. And that is client IP address is now the server IP, as well as the client version is server. See that the host IP address has changed because it's now running on the same local machine, so we get the local host IP address. And then because the parameter is evaluated when the callback script runs, not when I kicked off the script initially, it's returning the name of this layout, not the name of the layout that I started from, the process was kicked off. And so that's where if context is important, you need to make sure that you're passing information as a parameter to server script and then bringing it back via the result so that you can establish context with the callback script. So now here's an example. We're going to switch layouts to a script that on an on-timer script event. It's just going to start stepping through records so you can see what it looks like if the client is busy when the server has completed its task. Pick off the script, switch layouts again. Now this is just stepping through. It's not going to go through the entire found set. It's just going to go through. So it steps through. Obviously, this has taken longer than that 5-second delay that we have on server-side script. Now it comes back with the same information before as far as client and host. Obviously, our layout name has changed because now we're on this layout. So that is the perform script on server with callback, kind of what your appetite is to what is possible. Okay, on window transaction. This is a on window transaction event, and it's triggered by creating, updating, or delete operations. And that could be whether you're working with a single record, doing any one of those operations, or if you're using the create transaction and end transaction script steps that were introduced in FileMaker 19.6, and you're doing this with a set of records. Any of those operations will trigger this. And what it does is it does two things: is it runs a script, that's what script triggers are supposed to do, so that's what it does. But then it passes an inherent JSON object script parameter to the script that it triggers. And that JSON object contains these four things. You get the file name, get the base table name. You also get the record operation. Was it creating, modifying, or deleting? And then it also returns the internal record ID that FileMaker has assigned to that record, not its count in not the record number, it's the record ID. So interesting things of note here is that the on-window transaction script trigger is a file level trigger. We have object level triggers, we have layout level triggers. This is file level. So it doesn't matter whether if you enable this for your file and you go from one layout to another, form one of those events that's going to create a record, delete a record, modify a record, it's going to trigger this whether it's on the layout that you want. So whatever script that you're going to have it run, you need to make sure it handles all of those scenarios correctly. So that's something you want to be aware of. It also provides the ability to include additional file data in the JSON object script parameter. And we'll take a look at what that looks like so you can get more information than just a record ID. Whatever that occurs. And it will provide a method for logging every database interaction, but it doesn't do it out of the box. There's a lot more that needs to be done beyond what I'm just going to show you here this morning in order to create a robust audit logging operation. So don't think that it's a checkbox. It's a little bit more involved than that. I apologize. There is an engineering blog article that I found that goes into more detail about that idea of setting up audit logging. I forgot to put the link in the slides, but I already have updates that I need to upload anyway. So I'll go back, edit my slides, and put that link in the slides so that you'll have it if that's something. So let's take a look at this in action. So First thing we need to do, obviously, is we have a script to trigger with this into script workspace. And for the sake of this demo, I just went with a very simple script where we're just showing the dialogue, gave it a name, and then we're getting that script parameter that is generated by the event and sent back so you can see what that looks like. So you'll need more than this script to create auto logging to do that. All right, so then we also have to then enable it. So you find that under the File Options menu there, jump over to the triggers. It's the one here at the very bottom. That is the on-window transaction that you'll see right there. Select that. Now select our script. Now there is one parameter there, which is field name. We're going to circle back to that. Leave it blank for the moment. Okay. So I'm just going to make Millennium Force here a little bit taller. And when I commit that change, this is the record that, or the parameter that comes back when that script is triggered. Where it's getting the name of the file, getting the base table that we're on, telling me the record was modified, and this is record ID 24. And you'll notice that there is a double quote placeholder there. That's where that additional information that we specify will appear, provided we that field name parameter that I told you we were going to skip over. So now let's go ahead and go back in, and we will go ahead and add that scene. Now, for that field name, by default, it is looking for a field called on window transaction. Very original. But that wasn't good enough for me because I have a naming convention that I'm not allowed to violate. And so I put that this is a calculation field that is generating a JSON object about the fields or the information that I want to capture. And so now, I return Millennium Force to its original height, commit the record. Now, because of information that is in that unstored calculation field, I'm able to get more information about this record whenever that modification took. So we've got name, the duration, my primary key and foreign key. So now if I switch over to a different layout, I say, oh, this I can find easily, but I want to make sure that my database is up to date with the correct address. I'm going to go ahead and put it there, and I commit it. Because that field is defined in this table, it ran because, again, this is a file level. It's not tied to the layout, so it's going to run that script and return results. Except now it tells me that I'm on this table, record 6, and then I'm getting different information because even though the field it's named the same in this table, but obviously it's calculating differently. I'm able to return.
So can you log that then to another table? Because that
That is how you would go ahead and continue to build your auto logging. You would take that JSON and then pass it to additional scripts to do additional processing.
But you can put another table in the same solution with Cascade, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And any window where there's a completed transaction. Now, what you just saw there is I updated the phone number and it triggered the script, but the phone number wasn't included. So this is the calculation that I'm using in my unstored calculation field to generate the information that's going to be returned. Where it's a while loop, I'm getting the field names on a specific layout, getting the count, and then come down through, and then I just increment through that and say, get me the field name out of the list of fields, give me the value of that field, insert it into the JSON object, and then that JSON object is the result. And the reason why I did it that way is so that I didn't have to go back in and continually edit that calculation. If I want to now capture country, phone number to include in my potential audit logging, I just drag them onto this layout. Layout, go ahead and go back to my amusement parks. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to edit country again. So now, phone number and country now appear in the JSON object that returned. Go ahead and include whatever the next operation be. Now, there's probably more that I could do with that calculation to make it even more universal, so I don't even have to, it just knows what the layout is without me specifying the layout. But at least this way I'm getting the field names without having to constantly go back into the database design and specify.
If I do a replace field contents on a table, does it fire on every row? It can be very, very, very dangerous.
Yes, it could be very dangerous, and I did not test for that. But if a replace field contents generates a,
It commits on every time.
if it commits, I'm thinking it's probably going to, because it is a Windows transaction. Now, I don't know if it would commit at the beginning or if it would commit at the end. From what I was able to read, and if you'll notice the way the JSON is set up when it returns, is that I think if the audit log applies to like multiple records because you did create X number of records in a transaction, it'll actually give you an array that you're able to step through for like each record that was changed. But again, I didn't have a chance to test that.
Can you disable it for a specific window?
No, it's for the file.
I think what would be nice if you had a script that could actually change the on window transaction step for that layout.
I mean, there are ways, obviously, because you're knowing what layout you're on, you can say, okay, even if you trigger the script, skip it for this.
Yeah.
The other idea that I had, again, without testing, is if you use a separation model, you could do your audit logging over here, and if you need to do any of that utility stuff, you do it from this file with TOs and external tables that link back, because now the transaction script trigger is in this file and it's not over
You
here.
could use execute SQL, I take it, bypass. At all.
Yes, I would guess.
You can write with that, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, potentially, not related to that, but you could have a script trigger on field enter that captures the existing data, so the result comes through that change from this to that.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I believe so. So, actually, I see that we're over time, so I apologize for that. So, so I need to get them uploaded so that Claris can then upload them to the site. So give it a shake. But I can't give you my roller coaster database, but the file that we were looking at, it has the
Sandwiches?
You get all the slides. No sandwiches, unfortunately. But the other file that I use for multiple times will be included in the demo if you want to pair apart the scripts and stuff. So,